Hello everyone, Mike Starks with Remax Town & Country here, bringing you the mid-year real estate report for Fredericksburg and Gillespie County. And it's hard to believe that the first half of 2021 is already behind us. And as the world's kind of getting back to normal, I can tell you the real estate world still feels crazy. Real estate in the last half of 2020 was insanely busy, and that ended up making 2020 an all-time record for sales, despite that we really had a very slow first half of 2020. And now that we're halfway through 2021, we're still seeing just crazy demand for real estate, and that certainly shows in the mid-year report. So, as usual, let's just start with the numbers. So starting off with total sales for Gillespie County, that's homes, land, commercial, everything lumped together. So the first half of 2020, we'd sold just about $130 million. And for the first half of this year, we've sold an unprecedented $256 million. So, that's a whopping 49.3% increase in total sales over the previous year. Now, as I just mentioned, you have to keep in mind 2020, the first half of it anyway, was definitely not a record breaker because that's when COVID was really starting to freak everybody out. So instead, let's compare this to our previous record first half of the year, which was back in 2019. And in 2019's first half, we'd sold $145 million. So even if we compare that to the $256 million this year, that still makes 2021's first half a huge increase of 42.8% over the previous record. So really, no matter how you look at it, this has been a very busy beginning of the year. And that's also reflected in the total number of properties that have changed hands. In 2020, there were 293 transactions in the first half of the year, and the first half of this year we're at 514 transactions. So again, that number is up 43.4%. So let's move on to in-town home sales, because this is something I was really wanting to talk about for the mid-year report. Here we've also seen some really astonishing numbers. The first half of 2020, we've seen records in both total sales volume, but unfortunately that also means we've seen record high home prices. So to compare back again to last year, so June 30th, 2020, first half, we'd sold $51 million, and in 2021, we'd sold $88 million. So again, huge increase of 42%. But let's focus on prices, because that's what really is important if you're buying or selling right now. So again, comparing back to last year, the end of 2020, the average home price in the city limits of Fredericksburg was $457,304. As of June 30th this year, the average home price has risen to $516,651. So that's an increase of 11.5%, which is certainly high, but that's actually kind of mirroring what's happening across much of the U.S. right now. And that's not to say that's a good number, because, let's face it, that's a lot of money. But, I really don't see home prices getting more affordable in the foreseeable future, mainly because of that old supply and demand metric. I ran across a really interesting bit of information the other day concerning how many new homes have been built by decade in the U.S. since the 1930s. So take a look at this. From 1930 to 1939, we built 5.4 million homes in the U.S. And that number has steadily increased with the population up to 2000 to 2009, when we built 27.1 million homes. But then the '08 housing crash happened, builders lost confidence. So in the last decade, from 2010 to 2019, we actually dropped all the way back down to 5.4 million homes being constructed in the U.S. And the majority of those homes that were built were 3,000 plus square feet custom homes. So in the last decade, very few starter homes in the U.S. have been built. And, adjusted for population, we would have really needed to build closer to 30 million homes just to keep up. So we're so far behind now on supply that I think this pain in the housing market is likely going to be around for a while. And even if we do start just building at a record pace, unfortunately the whole government forced shutdown of everything has created a huge shortage in materials and a big jump in pricing. So building today is going to cost a whole lot more than it last year, and certainly a whole lot more than that 11.5% appreciation we saw in existing homes. And so I do believe that we'll continue to see steady price increases over the next 5 years. And as described, a lot of that is supply and demand, but the other half of the equation is inflation. You know, a house today might be 10% more than last year, but so is a gallon of gas, so is a trip to H-E-B. The next few years, inflation is just going to eat up the spending power of the dollar. So investing in things like real estate will at least keep a dollar's buying power up with inflation, which I guess actually is another reason why real estate is high demand right now. Now, I will say that the last 9 to 12 months have been nuts with with really a big feeding frenzy from folks just feeling like they have to buy now or it's going to be too late. However, I think what we're going to see now is that trend to start to cool off a bit. You know, I believe demand is going to stay steady for the foreseeable future, but, you know, the please take my money attitude is starting to wane. And that's mainly because sellers are just starting to put ridiculous prices on things, just hoping they will find a buyer, and that's still in panic mode. You know, in fact, you know, the last 3-4 weeks, I've already seen things starting to cool off a bit. You know, I'm starting to see price reductions on homes again pretty regularly, which in this market really means the house was probably a little overpriced to begin with. And you know, unfortunately, I think we as realtors, as an industry, have forgotten that we really need to still be giving people advice which is backed up by real data. Now, my job as a realtor is obviously to get my seller the highest and best deal possible, but I also think it's my duty to give, you know, realistic advice based on solid data. And I think that lack of advice may be what ends up slowing the market a little in the next few months as, you know, buyers start to lose that sense of urgency and buyers are starting to walk away from just overpriced inventory all across the nation. But right now, I think Fredericksburg is a very good example of that phenomenon, and I'll explain that. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, the average price for a house at the end of 2020 in Fredericksburg was $457,000. By mid-year of this year, we'd seen it increase up to $516,000, and that's a hefty increase. But as I record this video, the average asking price of a house in Fredericksburg today is now at $848,887. That makes the average asking price for a house right now in town 40% higher than any average sold comparable sale would support. And that's just not realistic or sustainable. You know, I had an old broker friend of mine named Sherman Durst from years ago. He used to tell me that when sellers put way too high a price on a property, that's because they were smoking something called hopium. And, you know, I think it's time for some sellers just to put that stuff down and take a breath for a minute. So anyway, I've talked longer than I meant to about homes in town and probably said more than I should. So let me just give you a real quick average land prices for mid-year in 2021. And I'll just tell you every segment real quick, and if you want to see a comparison to last year, I'll post that on my site. So anyway, here goes. So mid-year through 2021, an average city lot would cost you $79,770. 1 to 5 acres out in Gillespie County, the average price per acre for that is now at $61,933 an acre. For 6 to 10 acres, we've jumped to $25,346 per acre. 11 to 25 acres, $19,586 an acre. 26 to 50 acres, the average price is now at $23,822 per acre. And that really seems to be a hot spot, the 26 to 50 acre range right now. Then 51 to 100 acres, the average sales price so far this year is $13,653 an acre. 101 to 250 acres, we're at $11,330 per acre. And so far this year, we haven't seen anything that sold over 250 acres. And then if we look at like the average price for all the land in Gillespie County, we have to factor in that, you know, we've got a much higher price right now, much higher than usual, but that's because a lot of the 100-acre tracts that have sold have really went high. Nothing over 250 has sold yet this year. That usually helps bring the average down. But anyway, so the average price per acre as of June 30th, 2021 for all land in Gillespie County is sitting at $21,287 per acre. And this excludes sales on Highway 290 East. I've now been considering those more as commercial, so I'm pulling those out of my averages. So for the average price of an acre on 290 East, that's currently at $40,945 per acre. Commercial sales, we've also really seen a big resurgence there. And that's kind of what we expected for this year. Actually just halfway through this year, we're already well ahead of 2020. But, let's face it, 2020 was not a great year for commercial real estate because not too many people were thinking, hey, let's open a new business during the lockdown. So what do I think the rest of the year will hold? I think we'll really continue to see a steady demand, and we'll also continue to see increasing prices, although not quite at the pace we saw it the last 6 to 9 months, as that feeding frenzy kind of starts to wane. However, it's still a great time to sell because we're still at record prices, and if you're a buyer and you're seeing something that is priced fairly or even a little on the high end, I'd say go ahead and buy, because with inflation and demand plus housing costs, in a few years you'll be glad you bought. So second half of 2020, Gillespie County real estate looks very strong, maybe just at a little more of a healthy pace. So anyway, that's the first half real estate report for 2021 in a nutshell. You can get all these stats on my website at mikestarks.com under the information tab. If you're watching this on YouTube, there should be a link somewhere right around here. So anyway, as always, thanks for watching.